Dude, is your heart in it today?
I'm un-Adderalled. I'm unmedicated again.
Welcome to Downshift, everyone. My name is Paulo.
And my name is Matt, and we spent the week with Mazda's new CX70. In a strange fit for this segment, we're going to compare it against things like the Hyundai Santa Fe, but also upmarket things like something like a BMW X5. So today, we're going to cover the best and the rest of the Mazda CX70. So my chief issue with the car is really that it's just priced and sized weird for this segment. Now generally Mazda brings the most luxurious, but that means the most expensive, and they also have the most driver-oriented cars in the segment, which kind of means the smallest. Think CX5 for example. So maybe that they take their CX90, their big 3-row, remove a row from it, and then put it in the more mid-size, smaller segment, maybe that makes sense to compete against the other things in the segment. Maybe it'll be size-wise a more direct competitor. But it doesn't make sense when you leave it priced as the same as the 3-row. So how much does the straight six start at?
About $40,445.
And that's exactly what the CX90 starts at for the comparable trim. And the CX90 also offers a lower trim option for the straight six that's going to save you even more money. So it's less money for the 3-row. But let's take it from the top of the segment. What's the most expensive CX70 you can get?
The S Premium Plus starts at $55.9 thousand.
So again, that's the same exact price that you're going to get here on the CX70. I was on Mazda's website this morning. These numbers are fresh from there. And then still, in the CX90, you can get a lower trim of that power option for less money. So the price and size just don't necessarily make sense for this. And then when you consider that the Hyundai Santa Fe is going to start at $5,000 cheaper than this, and sure, this has a nice interior, but it's not like the Santa Fe is a shitbox on the inside. So it's big and kind of expensive. Usually Mazdas are small and kind of expensive, so this has to be a move in the right direction then, right? Now, no matter what anyone says, to me in my mind, and probably to anyone with a rational mind, this is a CX90 with a 3rd row delete. Sure, the trunk is big, sure the rear seats are a decent size, but this is 10 inches longer than a Hyundai Santa Fe, and the Santa Fe has more trunk space, and that's with the Hyundai also still having a 3rd row. I mean, for how big this Mazda is on the outside, how big the footprint is, it just doesn't feel super spacious on the inside. Even the cockpit here, where my legs are and where I'm sitting, feels a little cramped. There's just a couple tiny little nitpicks that I guess we'll cover for this video. Like for one, we've talked about it on a lot of Mazda videos, and it's that your center console isn't touchscreen, but it is when you go into Apple CarPlay. Now that being said, this little iDrive wheel does work pretty well, and this is a little bit further away, so maybe that kind of makes sense. You also do have a fully digital instrument cluster. It looks great, it just doesn't change a whole lot. And then there's something weird going on in the back seat. Paulo, do you want to show them? You've got heated seats back there, but you don't have cooled seats, which again, you would get in the CX90. And then back up here, we look at the seats themselves. Now this is the upgraded premium Nappa leather. You're only gonna get this in the Turbo S. You're not gonna get this no matter how much money you spend on the PHEV or the plug-in hybrid version. And then finally, this center console here. It's just too wide. It's a little bit wider. This is a big vehicle, and yet the cockpit is very tight. It feels driver-oriented, but this just feels like a fairly inefficient use of space, especially when you consider that your center console isn't very deep. So just feels like there's a couple things space-wise that could have been maximized, and a couple weird things, like your ambient light is just one color. And then the driving experience is a bit of two sides of a coin. We're going to talk about the cons first, and this is what kind of surprised me a little bit. And we made excuses for it last year in the CX90 because it was the first model year and everything was brand new. Chassis, gearbox, engine, everything. But some of those little idiosyncrasies have continued in the CX70 here. For one, the ride, it's kind of stiff. It's kind of stiff. Now that has a positive side, which we'll talk about later in the video, but there's just some other things, like with the powertrain. Like when you pull away from a stoplight or a stop sign or whatever, it almost feels like you're going uphill. Under 2,500 RPM, it just doesn't feel incredibly strong, even with the mild hybrid added electrical assist. And it doesn't sound that great either below 2,500 RPM. It almost reminds me a little bit of a diesel. And when the car is cold, the shifts, especially on downshift, if you're just in a quiet cabin, no music going, they're very pronounced, more so than I was expecting to see. Now again, these are smaller little, maybe nitpicky things, but just something that I noticed and something that we have to cover in the interest of being thorough. But like I said, this stiff ride that you're seeing here does translate to this being the best handling thing in this segment. And we'll talk about that more on the pro side, so let's get into those things. About to lock in.
Come on, prove me wrong.
But prove me long.
Prove me wrong, come on.
This man is long.
Prove me
as
long
shit.
right now.
All right, ready? And the best thing about this car, along with all the other modern Mazdas, is the cabin experience that you get here. Every design is really upscale. The materials are fantastic. Your door cards have a nice synthetic leather to them. You've got some ambient lighting down here. You've got some gold in your vents right about there, which is really cool. It shows up a little bit more on some darker cabins, but you do have a two-tone steering wheel, leather wrapped. Stitching is great on the interior of your rim here. You get into here, really plush and suede Alcantara dash. Look at how nice and soft that is. You get into here, very tactile, usable physical switches for your climate controls. This doesn't really make sense to me. You click down for colder, that makes sense, but I want to click up for hotter, but you have to click down. Just a weird thing, maybe just me. But you do have physical buttons for your heated steering wheel, your heated seat, your cooled seat, center console, again, a little bit too big, but it has a nice little detail to it. And then when we get into the seats themselves, this again is that Napa leather that we talked about. You can get a red interior. You're not going to be able to get a red interior on the CX90. That's just for the CX70. And this Napa leather is very, very nice. It's got this micro suede or Alcantara. You've got a contrasting little detail up the seat. And then even still on your door card, two-tone, really nice stitching. Everything just works really well and looks really, really upscale compared to anything else you're going to get in the segment. And now this is a big one. We're going to talk powertrains for the CX70 and the CX90. It's an all-hybrid lineup. Kind of, but technically, yes, it is. They're the same exact options that you get in the CX90. 3.3 turbocharged inline six with the 48-volt mild hybrid system in the base tune on the 70 here. You get about 280 horsepower, 332 pound-feet, but that's on regular gas. If you go up to the bigger trim, the turbo trims, you're going to do about 340 horsepower and 369 pound-feet. That's the more high-output tune of this. That is going to be on premium fuel. That mild hybrid system that you get on the straight six here is good for about 16 additional horsepower and 113 pound-feet of torque. You do feel that a little bit. It does, once the car warms up, start to feed in and smooth out gear changes. And you feel a little bit more immediate throttle and immediate torque off the line, but you really kind of have to get into the throttle to do that. The other engine powertrain configuration, of course, is the plug-in hybrid. That's the one we had on the CX90 last year. 2.5 liter, 4-cylinder plug-in hybrid with a single electric motor, 323 horsepower, so not the 340 that you get in the 6, but pretty close, and the same 369 pound-feet of torque that you get from the straight 6. That plug-in hybrid is also good for 26 miles of fully electric range. Again, we haven't tested that, so we'll take Mazda's word for it for now. And this thing will recharge, if you get the plug-in hybrid, in about 2 hours. That's what you want to get on a level 2, so make sure you get an Emporia like I have. I've got a link in the description. It's going to save you a bit of money. But let's say you run out of electric juice. With that and just the gas engine, or just kind of the basic hybrid system working away, it's going to be good for about 25 mpg combined. That's gas only, or just normal hybrid only. 0 to 60 though for your plug-in hybrid, 5.9 seconds. That's 0.2 seconds quicker than you get in this Turbo S. It's about 6.1 seconds to 60. Now, when you do get the plug-in hybrid, that'll also function as a generator, feeding you about 1.5 kilowatts. That'll be enough to run your house a little bit, or at least a few things in your house during a blackout or something like that. But no matter what you get, you're going to get the 8-speed wet clutch automatic transmission here. It's not exactly like a torque converter, but it works in tandem better with the new hybrid components. So it's that next generation of transmission and powertrain, and in working in this chassis, it is pretty good. Then we come to one of the other strong points of the CX70, as with all Mazdas, is the exterior styling. Now, it looks fantastic, but in my opinion, it's just not different enough from the CX90. There are a few things that are different between the 70 and the 90. Like, every little accent piece is going to be blacked out or darkened up. The grille here has a little bit different mesh kind of chain link pattern to it. These faux intakes or grills or whatever you want to call them, these don't exist in the CX90. The headlights are all the same. You also have a couple different color options here. Like, the signature color for the CX70 is like this really incredible kind of copper color. You can't get that on the CX90, much like the same way that you can get the artisan red, that deep kind of Merlot or burgundy color in the CX90. You can't get that in the CX70. You've also got body colored wheel arches here for your CX70, but only for the Turbo S trim, only the top trim. You also have unique wheels to the CX70. Front detail, the rest of the profile is all exactly the same as the CX90, but again, dark, dark, and dark down here. Again, the unique wheels, you come around the back, and it's basically identical to the CX90. It's not necessarily to say that it's bad, it is just kind of the same, but overall, probably still the best looking in the segment. What would you say?
I would agree. I really like the flared hips that you have a little bit here as well.
Now remember on the con side of the video, we talked about some behind the wheel experiences that maybe weren't exactly what I was looking for, but there are still some very strong pros to the driving experience. This is a Mazda after all, so everything in relative terms. Now, you do get standard all-wheel drive across any CX70, CX90, CX5, any SUV, CUV thing in Mazda's lineup. You'd love to have standard all-wheel drive. This is also a new chassis that debuted with the CX90, so it's a rear bias system, so it's feeding power into the back first, and that kind of helps with that handling. Like we said, this is the best handler in the segment. Does not have the adaptive suspension. That results in it being a little bit stiff. This is a tall thing, it's a big thing, there's a lot of weight to keep balanced, so you don't have an adaptive damper, so you don't have that flexibility in terms of, I want a little bit of cushier ride. Mazda kind of splits that difference a little bit with a static damper, saves you a little bit of money. It does feel a little bit stiff on normal day-to-day driving. On a great road, it's gonna feel great, but it does make you feel a little bit more planted when you're driving toward the limit. You've also got KPC, or kinematic posture control, that we originally saw on the MX-5. That's kind of a brake vectoring thing that Mazda integrated on that car, and that helps bring down the inside wheel. So if I'm in a hard left-hander, it's going to pull on that back left wheel to keep the body level rather than getting a bunch of body roll. Again, this is going to be the best handling thing once you start to drive it a little bit hard. Now, I don't know how hard you're going to drive your 200-inch long SUV, but if you need to drive hard and you like to get a little spirited behind the wheel, this is the thing you want to do it in. And this thing isn't just a looker, this thing has some muscle to back it up. If you go for the plug-in hybrid, your towing capacity will max out at 3,500 pounds. That's kind of in line with something of the smaller segment, you could say, but in this straight six with the Turbo S, max towing capacity is 5,000 pounds, and that's on par with any of the dedicated three-row SUVs. Telluride, Palisade, I think Honda Pilot as well, and I think your Grand Highlander. So this is pretty impressive, and it has the muscle to back up the looks. Now, normally we lump this part into technology, but I do want to give a big shout out to Mazda for their driver assistance tech. This is, at least in recent memory, the first Mazda that I've seen that has a fully competitive, not necessarily leading the pack, but definitely competitive with the segment driver assist tech. You've got the adaptive cruise, you've got a lane centering, lane tracing assist. You can keep your hands off the wheel for a couple seconds at a time, but just rest your hand on the wheel. It'll basically drive down the highway for you. This does a lot better than any other Mazda that we've ever been in. This is much more competitive with like a Honda Safety Sense, a Toyota Safety Sense, or a Honda Sensing, whatever they're calling it, but it's much more competitive. It works really well, and it even recognizes whether I've got a car in front of me or a motorcycle. And it's very, very good. Now we are going to talk about the back seats, but first look at the door. Now this is kind of what we saw on the CX50 as well. Almost 90-degree opening. It's going to make it easier to load stuff into the car. But then we take a look in here. You don't have captain's chairs. Obviously it's not a three-row, so you do have this bench seat, but it is mobile. So it'll slide back and forth a pretty wide degree. So I've seen Mazda do this in their literature. They'll fold it like this, and then you have this storage compartment back here. I don't know why you would do that, but apparently you can do it. So I'll fold the seats back, put the seats back, and then I'll step in. Because I am 6'1", and I'm sitting behind myself, just about. Got plenty of knee room here. It's pretty nice. Again, all of the nice materials continue back here. Same thing with your door card. You even have a manual sunshade back here. The thing that I'm going to complain about, you do have a climate zone back here, you do have climate vents back here, and USB-Cs, and even heated seats, but you don't have cooled seats, which again, you would have on the CX90 for the same money. You also have a fully dedicated panoramic roof. And I think it might even be standard depending on what trim you get. But again, just a weird thing to omit in your CX70 that you would get in a CX90 for the same money. Damn!
Oh, I do the key in my pocket.
40
Wait,
and 75. See?
Try now. I'm sorry.
Trying to make me look like a fool on camera. It would have worked too. We are going to talk about the trunk, and it's fairly nice, although we're going to talk pros and cons here. Now, it is powered. Obviously, as you can see, you can have kick gesture as well. Thing is, I'm 6'1". That's a little bit of a thing for me. But you do have close, and you do have lock. With the seats up, you're looking at about 40 cubic feet of space. It's quite big. We went to the lake this weekend. We brought everything, tubes, wakeboards, all of our stuff, dogs. So it is pretty practical. You also have power outlets over here, 12 volt and house style. You've got grocery bag hangers here, and you can fold the rear seats with a touch of a button. They don't come back up, obviously, but it's nice to have that feature. With them down, you're looking at about 75 cubic feet of space. Again, pretty practical, But if we are going to make that comparison to the Hyundai Santa Fe is 10 inches in shorter overall footprint from an exterior, and it's going to bring you a third row, and it's going to bring you 5 more cubic feet of max storage capacity or max cargo capacity. You can tell really that this is just a CX90 that's had the third row removed, because you do have cup holders in here still that you can see. And when you lift the floor up here, that looks pretty familiar. And where the third row would have been, you do have a cubby. Now I'm assuming that Mazda's not including that in their cargo figure. And to be honest, I don't think I would include it, because no one's ever going to use that, in my opinion. So leave it in the comments if you think you would use that cubby, and if it makes it practical enough for you. And usually we kind of ding Mazda a little bit in terms of its tech, but the tech here is actually pretty solid. You have a pretty robust head-up display that works in tandem with your driver assist stuff. That's going to show you even if you have a car in front of you or a motorcycle or whatever. So that's really nice. You also have the upgraded fully digital 12.3-inch digital cluster here on your Turbo S. This is very nice. The black levels are great. The graphics are great. Into your center screen though, this is the main event. And this is kind of a typical Mazda UI. Again, it's not touchscreen here, but when you go into Apple CarPlay, which is wireless, same with Android Auto, it is touchscreen, which is really, really nice. So I think overall, the tech suite is pretty good. You throw it into reverse, you have a 360 camera. It still does have the bars over here, which I don't love, but the resolution's pretty good. The graphics are pretty good.
Okay, I forgot we had everything in the back. All right, CX70. This is the 2025.
This is 2025.
Yes.
It sounds okay when you get it above like 2,500 or 3,000 RPM.
Yeah, so
before that, it sounds almost diesel-ish.
It does sound very interesting, and I mean, I think we both have some points on this, but let's talk about the standouts for the week. Do you want to go?
Yes, the interior, great. This little Alcantara, like, it just looks fantastic. In the same way that the CX70 did, in the same way that the CX50 does, in the same way.
I think you meant to say 90. You said 70.
Did I? Okay.
Yes.
But yeah, so
yes,
the 90,
yes.
the 50, like, Mazda does a great job with their interiors. They just do. They feel that bridge between the economy and the luxury segment.
Yeah.
And this is great. I like the interior. There's things that don't make sense in terms of packaging and like uses of space.
Right, especially in the trunk.
Yeah, yes, and this, but we've talked about it. But in terms of the actual like visual, the materials, what you interact with, it's very good.
Yeah.
It's very good. So that's a big standout.
Yeah, my standouts for me is the interior is gorgeous. The exterior is really good looking as well. I like the way this thing looks. I will say though, I thought that the ride is a little bit stiff.
Oh, yep.
But the seats are very comfortable.
That is true as well, unlike the CX-5.
Yeah. I also really like how often the iStop feature kicks in and off.
Yeah.
I feel like it's unnoticeable on the highway. It does a nice job of that.
Mm-hmm.
But similar to you, I think that at low speeds or when you're taking off from a stop sign, the engine, the powertrain, the hybrid system just seems kind of clunky, makes weird noises, and it's just not a very smooth transition of power.
Yes.
Off the line.
100%. And this is kind of the thing where like Mazda, when they did their launch, they brought out like a BMW X5 as their like, this is what we compete against kind of thing. And it's like, I see what you're trying to do, because when you look at this thing on paper, okay, straight six, about this is like within about 5-ish inches of an X5, so I can see where they're making some of these comparisons. Plus, this is like proper nice on the inside. Yeah. But the BMW X5 also uses a straight six with a mild hybrid, but they've finessed that and tuned that mild hybrid system to make shifts almost invisible, even when it's cold. When this thing warms up a little bit, it gets better,
a little smoother, yeah.
But it's never invisible to the point where that BMW is. Now again, we're comparing a Mazda to a BMW, so there's that caveat there, but they brought it up, you know what I mean? So if they want to make that, if they want to make that comparison, then let's talk about it. To me, I kind of think that a comparison to this is a Hyundai Santa Fe. Mm-hmm. That's also new for this, and it's a very different vibe. That's more of like geometric, it's more truckish looking, but we've been talking about it all video. The Santa Fe is smaller, but a bigger interior, and it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And it gives you a third row, and you don't sacrifice any trunk space for that. This is still great, but the Hyundai's better use of
and
space.
I mean, I have two comparisons as well that I think I'd like to make is this compared to the CX90, and we talked about it in the video. They're virtually the exact same price.
The same. They are the exact same price.
But here, you don't have that option to leverage that third row seats. You also don't have heated rear or cooled rear seats in this.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily know why you would pick this over a CX90. But if you have chosen this or you would choose this, please let us know in the comments why you went that route. I think a lot of us would be really curious.
Did you not know that the CX90 existed?
Right, yeah, maybe they did. The other comparison that I would make, and I know it's not necessarily like for like because this is a lot nicer of an interior, but the Grand Highlander would also be a cheaper option than the S Premium Plus, and basically the same price as the S Premium. Yeah,
and that's an interesting comparison because the Grand Highlander is that dedicated huge three-row.
Right.
But you get the hybrid.
Yeah.
It's good fuel economy. It rides really well. It's a very different philosophy because that Grand Highlander is really squishy. This is stiffer, but it handles a lot better. Like if you, I don't know who's hustling their 200-inch long SUV, but if you want to hustle a 200-inch long SUV, this is the 200-inch long SUV that you want to hustle.
Right.
Because it handles well, it turns well, the steering feels all right, the brakes are pretty good, the power once you get it up in the rev band is pretty good, but it doesn't do that like soft, cushy family thing as well. Overall, I think at the end of the day, what this ends up being for me is like, it just, if the CX90 wasn't there, then this thing would make sense to me.
Yeah.
It's just too expensive and too similar to that to make this make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think
it's not that this is bad, it just doesn't make sense.
No, I'm right there with you. I would personally, if I was looking at this and I wanted a Mazda, I would get the CX90.
Yeah, so thank you to Mazda for letting us have a go in your CX70. Thank you to you for watching. Leave it down in the comments if you would have this over a CX90 or if you wouldn't. And we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.